Howdy gamers, let's talk about the runes for Malzahar mid lane. Things that Malzahar wants from his runes is either utility or damage, and really his only two good options in terms of keystones is going to be Summon Airy, Unsealed Spellbook, and I suppose Glacial, but Glacial would rarely outweigh Unsealed Spellbook. The reason you wouldn't go something like Arcane Comet, Electrocute, Predator, etc. is because they're really off theme with what Malzahar does as a champion, and also um, they don't do things like better than what Airy or Unsealed Spellbook would. With Arcane Comet, whenever you damage a champion, it hurls a comet at their direction, and this comet isn't guaranteed to hit. So until you would complete Rylai's, you really don't have a guaranteed hit outside of your ult. The cool thing about Comet though is that its cooldown is reduced for every time you land another ability, and Malzahar has a shit ton of instances of damage with his abilities. So he has damage over time, he has area effect, and he has single target. So you have multiple ways to proc multiple comets, and especially where you can get multiple rotations of your abilities off in a fight, you just have a lot of ways to proc a lot of comets. But the thing is that Malzahar is always going to be hitting one target usually because his E is single target, and that's a lot of what you're playing around. And usually, since you're playing defensive, um, Summon Airy would be giving you more procs because the target would be close to you or close to your team when you're damaging them. So with Arcane Comet, it'd be better used by a control mage that could damage the backline consistently, and then that's really the benefit of it because Arcane Comet lands in an AoE, so it can damage multiple targets, and your abilities basically need to slow for that to be guaranteed too, especially in the laning phase. So you really lose a pretty significant laning tool in Summon Airy that can be procced with even just your auto attacks. And then with Summon Airy for Malzahar, unlike other champions, it actually does scale with him since he's so short range. Um, Basically, any instance of damage that you can have on the enemy can proc Summon Airy multiple times, and since you're so close to them, it can be procking multiple times. So every auto attack could proc it. Every single tick of the E while you're ulting them, like you can get multiple Airy procs, and that's just more damage built up versus the one Arcane Comet proc. With anything in the Domination tree, it's pretty misguided, but I think the most common would be like Electrocute or Predator. With Predator, you would have this extra option of like extra movement speed on active for your boots, so that would inevitably help you with your roams. But with the roams, they're going to happen anyways. You're better off getting better roams through having better wave control, and then having more damage on the gank. With Predator 2, it tells the enemy like, hey, I'm coming. And with a Malzahar ult, it's better used when your allies are closer. So if the enemy's running away and you're Malzahar ulting them, it's very, very hard for your team to follow up. And then if they're not following up, you're probably not killing the person. And then you're just like in a bad position because you're on the enemy side of the map. And Malzahar is like effectively just a defensive champion. And if he's there, he's really stranding himself. So I don't see a huge amount of Predator in the early game. Mid to late game, I also don't see it as, yes, it can give you more movement speed to like ult targets that you would already be in front of. So again, it's like putting you off sides in a fight for no particular reason. I don't see like any good value out of it. And then with Electrocute, you're not looking to burst one target. With Malzahar, you're looking to damage like everyone. And even though Electrocute might give you like different lethals, a lot of control mages can use this rune just to solo kill their lane. But a Malzahar doesn't even make great use out of it, as you would have to land EQ, EQ W auto or EQ ult, etc. And they would put you in the domination tree, which isn't too bad for Malzahar, but you do lose a lot of value not going to the sorcery tree. So starting off with a keystone that I'm going to recommend, it's going to be Summon Airy and Unsealed Spellbook. Starting off with Summon Airy, whenever you attack an enemy champion, or whenever you damage an enemy champion with your auto attacks or abilities, it will send Airy to them, damaging the enemy champion. And then the cooldown of Summon Airy is how long it takes Airy to come back to you from the champion that you damage. So with Malzahar's auto attack range, it's effectively up every single time you could auto attack. And then if you end up damaging them with the Q or the E, it's going to be proccing then. And whenever you're just ulting them and you're suppressing them, but you're also stationary yourself, it's also going to be proccing Airy multiple times during that duration. So with Summon Airy, you do have lots and lots and lots of ways to proc this multiple times. And since it procs multiple times, you really start to build up the damage offered from it. Versus higher like initial damage runes like maybe Arcane Comment or Electrocute. So Malzahar does make really good use out of Summon Airy. Other control mages that would use this mid lane that don't make particularly good use out of the other keystones usually use it for like their levels 1 to 4. Malzahar can use it for that as you have control over the wave kind of regardless in a winning matchup. And then even with just your auto attacks is adding more damage to it. But with this rune, it really starts helping you out around level 6, obviously when Malzahar has his ult. And then it continues to be useful because Malzahar is so short range, and then you have so many ways to proc it multiple times, especially if you're playing Malzahar defensively and letting the enemy come into you versus offsetting yourself positionally and then committing yourself into the enemy. So for the secondary runes, you have your best options always going to be Monoflow Ban. There might be brief instances in which you want to run Nullifying Orb against like Karthus jungle, Vygar mid, Syndra mid, etc. But in most cases, it's going to be Monoflow Ban. With Monoflow Ban, hitting an enemy champion with an ability permanently increases your mana by 25 up to 250, so it's a Sapphire Crystal for free. And then after reaching the 250 bonus mana, you restore 1% of your missing mana every 5 seconds. So with this, it's kind of a reward for hitting your abilities early, and then to build up the extra mana does help, as regardless of what you're building, the extra mana is going to go a pretty long way, helping you cast multiple rotations of your Q and E, and with that, you're just getting more damage because of it. And yeah, like Malzahar just makes good use of mana. It's really not that complicated. With the third rune, you have good options in Transcendence, and then like a pretty bad option in Absolute Focus. With Transcendence, you gain 10% cooldown reduction at level 10, and then once you go over the cooldown reduction cap, you gain bonus ability power for that, which Malzahar could end up doing depending on what you build. And then with Absolute Focus, while you're above 70% HP, you gain bonus ability power based on your level. With this, the bonus ability power offered isn't really that useful, especially in the early levels. So you would have this from levels like 1 to 9 over Transcendence, but having that extra ability power at that stage really isn't that important. And then later and later the game goes, the more useful the 10% cooldown reduction is going to be, as getting another rotation of your Q and E off is always going to equate to more damage than the ability power offered from Absolute Focus. So I think that's always going to be your best bet, especially the way that Malzahar functions as a champion. For the fourth rune, you have good options in Scorch or Gathering Storm. Gathering Storm gives you ability power every 10 minutes, and then Scorch gives you more damage whenever you land an ability on an enemy champion, and it's on a 10-second cooldown. So with Scorch, I think when you have lanes that you can run Gathering Storm, you should. So against just hard farming lanes or scaling lanes, so against like Ornn mid lane or Orianna, champions that really negate the laning phase, I think you should go with Gathering Storm, because with Scorch, it's mostly for your early damage levels like 6 to about 13. And after that, you're really losing out on some value, especially when champions start building Magic Resist. And once Teamfight starts having the ability power offered from Gathering Storm is going to go a lot further. Malzahar is also an infinitely scaling champion, so Gathering Storm goes hand in hand with that. If you're sitting on the 24 ability power offered at 20 minutes, that's completely fine. 30 minutes, it goes to 48. 40 minutes, it goes to 80 ability power. Like, this just keeps getting better and better for Malzahar, as your itemization never stops. You never have to stop farming on this champion, so you can have Deathcap, Liandry's, plus this ability power from runes. You're really going to be this, like, he's like one of the few hyper carries in the game that nobody really talks about. But with Scorch, you do get a little bit of extra damage early. So think about it. I suppose in lanes where they don't have any sustain, and you do win early, you should look to run this. So against champions like LeBlanc, Silas, Yasuo, etc., those type of lanes, I think Scorch is completely fine. But against like farming lanes or losing lanes, I think Gathering Storm is going to be your better bet. At higher MMR, Gathering Storm is also going to gain value. And if you're playing in solo queue, which basically everyone is, like, Scorch does get a ton of value compared to any scaling rune. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a hard toss-up, and that, yeah, into lanes with no sustain, really look to run it. But if you want to be greedy and you believe in your abilities, I think Gathering Storm is a better option. For the secondary runes, you do have a lot of good options. You have Cheap Shot Ultimate Hunter in the Domination tree. You have a lot of things in Inspiration. You could run Freeboots Biscuits. You could run Freeboots Futures Market. You could run Futures Market Cosmic Insight. All of these have like pretty unique advantages that they offer. With Futures Market, this is to get Lost Chapter over the lane opponent before they could ever get it. And if you come back to lane with a Lost Chapter, when the enemy mid laner can't recall, especially champions that have to match the Lost Chapter, so like Syndra, every mage basically, then you can lock them into lane, and then you really start snowballing because you can permanently push out your wave and permanently farm both teams' raptors, and you never run out of mana. It's so, so strong. With Cosmic Insight, it's going to give you 5% cooldown reduction on your abilities, summoner spells, and items. So it's kind of generally useful. This is giving you about as much cooldown reduction on your ult as Ultimate Hunter would. So in this tree, it's really, really solid. I think if you're looking to scale with something like Gathering Storm, this is your best bet because it puts you in a position with Lost Chapter early to really just farm the map and take over. Take over like just based on your resource generation, and that's so, so unique and so strong for Malzahar. You could also run free boots, but with free boots for Malzahar, it's not so important that he gets to Sorkpin boots or Lucidity boots at any like really quick time. So like when you get them, it's fine. But if you were looking to snowball something, I suppose, or if you were looking to just match like a more chaotic solo queue game, I suppose having your boots faster and not having to pay for them, so you'd have like Ludens plus Sorkpin into whatever with this, it would be completely fine. You, I suppose that's how you should look at it, as like a band-aid to solo queue chaos. I guess that's okay. For the Domination tree, you have the good option of Cheap Shot and Ultimate Hunter, or Cheap Shot and Relentless Hunter. With Cheap Shot, damaging an enemy with impaired movement or actions deals 10 to 45% or 10 to 45 true damage based on level, and then it's only on a 4-second cooldown. So it's very easy for Malzahar to proc this with his Q and R 2 times in an all-in, and then you can also proc it 3 times by hitting 2 Qs, and then once you build Rylai's, you're going to be hitting everyone with this. And that's just effectively giving you a lot more damage. Cheap Shot in combination with Airy and Scorch is a lot more damage that you otherwise don't have. And that's pretty unique for Malzahar. So this will give you a lot stronger of like a 2-item spike or 3-item spike. So if you're playing like a fight game, Cheap Shot and Ultimate Hunter is going to be giving you better value than Futures Market and Cosmic Insight. But if you're playing a resource game, Futures Market and Cosmic Insight is the way to go. But I think I would recommend this as it goes more naturally with your build. With Cheap Shot 2, like I said, once you complete Rylai's, you're going to be applying it to everyone, and then yeah, it's just effectively more damage. To add that true damage too is really deceptive, especially with how Malzahar like usually conducts himself. Usually people don't think of Malzahar dealing a lot of damage, but then they jump on him, and then he's getting multiple rotations of the summon Airy off, multiple rotations of the Cheap Shot off, and then having the Scorch on top of that, and then yeah, every other instance of his damage builds up pretty quickly. For the shards, you have options of the cooldown reduction rune. Again, if you're playing to scale and a resource game, I think Futures Market, Cosmic Insight, and then cooldown reduction from the shards is completely fine. With Transcendence, even if you build over CDR, this will eventually convert into ability power, and missing out on this ability power early isn't that bad for Malzahar. And then you could have ability power armor, or you could even run double resistances depending on your matchup. Especially against harder mid lane matchups, so against like champions like Fizz, maybe double magic resist would be the way to go. And then sitting on the cooldown reduction would give you a little bit of value, even if like you're missing out on some CS or something. A more standard build would be something like ability power, and then a resistance depending on your matchup. So if you're playing into an AD matchup, champions like Kiana, Lucian, armor is the way to go. And then if you're playing into an ability power matchup like Syndra, Orianna, Diana, Fizz, etc., magic resist is the way to go. So, but do consider these more defensive options, as Malzahar is one of the few champions that can scale and like make use of these defensive options early. And if the enemy can't kill you early, can't really get a lead, then holy, you can just really take over a game with Malzahar so long that you're farming properly. So that's the runes for Malzahar mid lane. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I answer literally all of them. And if this video helped you, leaving a like on the video helps me. And if you're interested in watching me play or talk about League of Legends, you can check out my Twitch. It's twitch.tv/Sawyer_Nelson. Hey, I'll see you there, man. Dude, whenever Malzahar's support was like really strong, that was one of my favorite supports. There was like Miss Fortune. She was the best support ever, hands down. Malzahar was kind of high up there, but they killed him real fast. They were not having it. Yet, like, Tom Kinch existed in the game for so long. Like, whatever, man. Dude, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Anyways, with Unsealed Spellbook, it's also a great option with Malzahar, as it gives you an access to summoner spells, and with this, you get an ignite early game, you get an exhaust, you get a heal, and that's mostly the utility of it. Having a ghost is pretty useful, and then having a barrier is also kind of useful. So with it, you really subvert non-matchups, especially like at higher MMR, you would gain more value out of Unsealed Spellbook, but at lower MMRs, I think you would always get more value out of just Cheap Shot, Airy, and Scorch, regardless of how you're playing Malzahar, because there's just going to be more fights happening. At a higher MMR, when things are less chaotic and then you're scaling more, Unsealed Spellbook gains a lot of value, especially in matchups where it's just wave clear, as you basically enter a team fight with 3 summoner spells in your ignite, your flash, your exhaust, your heal, whatever you're bringing, other than your teleport and flash, which is probably your default if you're running this. Um, so going into every fight, if you have an exhaust, it's so strong. If you have an ignite, if you have a barrier, and if you're not going to be getting any value out of the summon Airy, Scorch, and then the other offensive runes in the early game, which the early game being like 0 to like 25 minutes, then Unsealed Spellbook is going to be giving you better value. So with Unsealed Spellbook, it puts you in the inspiration tree, and then your best options here are like Magical Footwear. Again, you can have Futures Market if you're playing for the Lost Chapter. You can run Minion Dematerializer if you're looking to just have control over the first couple ways, which again is a higher MMR thing, where you can dematerialize the caster minions, the cannon minion, or the melee minion, depending on how the lane state's going, or at exact timings to give you level 6 or to push out a particular wave to roam. So Minion Dematerializer has a lot of play potential. And then with Biscuits, it's like your insanely passive option. It's saying like, I don't want the Lost Chapter, I don't want to make plays with the Minion Dematerializer, I just want a little bit of extra mana, and that's really all Biscuits offers for Malzahar. So I'd recommend Futures Market Steel because of the Lost Chapter buy, and that's pretty much it. And then Cosmic Insight's your best option. Approach Velocity and Time Warp Tonic just aren't needed. You're not skirmishing to get value out of Time Warp Tonic, and then with Approach Velocity, Malzahar just doesn't make great use out of it. And if you're in the Inspiration Tree primary, I think your best bet is Sorcery second with Mana Flow and Transcendence, as you get so much value out of the mana offered, and then so much value out of the 10% cooldown reduction. The same sort of thing with Cheap Shot and Ultimate Hunter loses its kick when you don't have the extra damage from Summon, Airy, and Scorch comparatively. So with this, you're looking to scale, and then you could run cooldown reduction, resistances, scaling health, or just double resistances, since you're really just trying to get through the early game with Malzahar. But since you're scaling, I suppose, since you would run this in a non-matchup, I suppose the scaling health wouldn't be bad either. So yeah, Unsealed Spellbook. I wish I mentioned it before I closed out the video, man. What am I doing, dude?